Have you ever walked into a room you built and felt something was off? Not broken, just wrong in a way that doesn't have words. A glance that lingers too long. A joke that cuts just a little deeper than it should. A silence that feels too cold. You shake it off because that's what strong leaders do. But deep down, something's shifting. And if you're honest, you can feel it. Most people think betrayal is loud, that it storms in, demands power, makes noise. But real enemies, the ones who truly want you gone, they move differently. They study, they nod, they smile, they offer help. And while you're focused on scaling, building, leading, they're positioning themselves in the background, preparing to make you irrelevant. This video is not about fear. It's about awareness. It's not about dramatizing the threat. It's about recognizing it before it's too late. Because in modern leadership, the deadliest attacks don't come from competitors. They come from people who've memorized your rhythm, who've seen your weaknesses, who are biding their time, not to challenge you, but to replace you. If that unsettles you, good. You're waking up. What you're about to learn are 5 chilling, surgically calculated behaviors, real-world patterns that reveal when someone close doesn't just dislike you. They want you erased, not removed from the meeting, removed from the story. So before we dive in, do yourself one favor. Hit subscribe. Because after this, you'll never look at loyalty the same way again. Ready? Let's begin. Sign number 1. The strategic shadow. No one tells you this, but the most dangerous person in your company is the one who never challenges you in public. They don't interrupt you in meetings. They don't question your authority. They don't argue your ideas. In fact, they nod when you speak. They praise your leadership. They admire how far you've taken the company. But if you look closely, they're always watching. They know your schedule better than your assistant. They arrive before you, leave after you, and somehow always seem to be around when you're most vulnerable. They ask quiet questions that sound like curiosity. How did the investor meeting go? Still planning to attend that offsite in Napa? What happens if we hit Q3 shortfall? On the surface, it's harmless, but over time, the pattern emerges. This isn't a team player. This is a strategist in the shadows. A patient architect of information, quietly collecting data, studying your behavior, charting your blind spots, and waiting. I knew a man like that once. His name was Nathan Cole, CEO of a thriving fintech startup in Boston. Sharp, disciplined, calculated, built his company from nothing and led with focus. But somewhere along the way, his operations chief, the guy who never raised his voice, never fought for credit, never made a power play, started becoming too consistent. He showed up at every investor dinner, even the ones he wasn't invited to. He stayed after strategy meetings to help clean up, volunteered to organize board reports, shadow executive calls, even coordinate Nathan's travel. Nathan appreciated the help until the day a key investor pulled out, citing concerns about internal inconsistencies. Then came a leaked expansion plan handed directly to a rival and a sudden resignation, followed by that same operations chief announcing his new title, CEO of a competing firm, backed by the very investor Nathan had just lost. The betrayal didn't happen overnight. It was mapped, timed, engineered. Because real enemies don't always strike loud. They move with grace. They wear loyalty like a tailored suit. And they sit just close enough to hear your next move before you've even made it. The Stoics warned us, appearances are deceptive and not to be trusted without testing. Epictetus. As leaders, we're trained to look forward, to plan, to execute, to expand. But what we rarely train is rearguard awareness. You can't afford to confuse helpful with harmless. Support is not always loyalty. And those who observe too much while saying too little should concern you more than those who push back. So here's what you do. Audit patterns, not just performance. Notice who mirrors your movements, who volunteers for everything, but never has ideas of their own, who smiles wide but leaves no digital trail of dissent. Then trust your discomfort. Your instincts aren't paranoia, they're signal. And when that signal whispers, "This feels too convenient," you listen. Nathan learned that too late. But you don't have to. Because in a world of polite predators, discernment is leadership. And awareness is survival. Sign number 2, the internal discreditor. Here's the hard truth. The people destroying your reputation aren't across the table. They're already in the room. They don't come at you head on. They don't throw public punches. In fact, they'll praise you in meetings, laugh at your jokes, and ask if you need help with that next quarterly report. But behind closed doors, they're telling a very different story. Not loudly, strategically, not to everyone, just to the right people. This is not ordinary office gossip. It's a quiet, deliberate campaign, one designed to fracture trust in you, piece by piece. To your investors, it might sound like concern. He's been under a lot of stress lately. To your team, she's been distant, maybe overwhelmed. To HR, I'm not saying anything's wrong, but it might be worth a closer look. None of these statements are direct attacks. That's what makes them so effective. They're designed to plant doubt without evidence, to trigger just enough suspicion that others begin watching you differently, questioning your competence, second-guessing your decisions, even when you're performing at your best. I've seen this tactic unravel people who built companies from the ground up. I've watched founders lose control, not because of market forces or bad product fits, but because someone they trusted made them look unstable, one whispered comment at a time. These aren't emotional outbursts. These are tactical strikes on your credibility. The internal discreditor doesn't want to argue with you. They want to make sure that when your name comes up in a conversation, there's always a shadow over it. This is the person who never says anything bad directly, but somehow every firestorm seems to start after they've had a private conversation. This is the one who frames concerns as care, complaints as compassion, and sabotage as support. They move like ghosts, always present, never provable. They won't accuse you publicly. They won't leave a paper trail, but somehow the walls start closing in. People become cold, trust becomes thin, and you begin to wonder, why is everything falling apart at once? This is the hidden brilliance of their strategy, fragmentation. They don't destroy you in one blow. They pull at the threads of your network until you stand alone, isolated, unsupported, and surrounded by people who've been convinced maybe something really is off about you. From a Stoic lens, this is spiritual warfare, not against your ego, but against your inner order. Because once you start trying to prove your innocence, once you chase every rumor, once you start reacting to whispers, you've already lost the center. Marcus Aurelius warned, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And Seneca followed with, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." When someone moves like this inside your organization, you don't fight with outrage. You defend with evidence. You don't explain your worth. You embody it. You don't chase approval. You anchor yourself in consistency. Here's what you do. First, document everything. Keep a quiet trail of what was said, by whom, and when. Not to retaliate, but to remain grounded. Then, tighten your circle. Stop oversharing. Observe reactions in meetings. Who nods but never supports? Who agrees but subtly redirects trust? And most importantly, resist the urge to prove yourself through overexposure. That's what they want. They want you frantic, overcompensating, desperate to explain why you're still worthy. But you don't win by fighting shadows. You win by staying still and letting truth accumulate. Because in the long game, character compounds. And the people who truly matter, investors, allies, long-term players, they will eventually see through the noise. If someone came to mind while reading this, don't brush it off. Don't gaslight yourself into silence. Don't say, maybe I'm being paranoid. You're not. You're being hunted quietly by someone who knows they can't beat your results, so they're trying to beat your reputation. This isn't office politics. This is reputation warfare, and they don't just want you disliked, they want you discredited, removed, and replaced. So if they're already in the room, you better stop treating this like a misunderstanding. This isn't friction, this is infiltration, and survival starts with seeing it for what it is. Sign number 3, the Trojan advisor. What if I told you that the person you trust most isn't loyal, just well-positioned? They don't knock on your door like an enemy. They don't come in shouting, criticizing, or demanding control. No, they come bearing help, support, loyalty. They call you visionary. They offer to ease your burden. They listen when others don't. They become what every great leader is told to cherish, a trusted advisor. But behind the calm voice and open-ended questions lies a mind more strategic than supportive. You see, the Trojan advisor isn't here to assist, they're here to access. They offer their insight in moments of fatigue. They stay late during crises. They're always one step behind you, not because they're following, but because they're mapping. Their curiosity isn't casual, it's surgical. They ask about your succession plan, your family's involvement, your fallback strategy if the market shifts, your vulnerabilities in litigation, your frustrations with the board, and you think, finally, someone who understands. But the truth is, they're downloading your entire leadership operating system so that when they act, they don't just strike. They replace. I once knew a founder named Elena Bishop, built her media startup from scratch, scaled fast, gained traction, raised capital, but she was tired and lonely at the top. That's when a former classmate reappeared, a corporate strategist, charming, calm, sharp. He offered to help shape long-term direction, said he believed in her, offered to handle team restructuring and investor relations while she focused on creative work. It felt like relief, finally, someone who could hold some of the weight. But relief turned to rupture. Months later, Elena discovered he'd built a nearly identical media company. Same pitch deck, same positioning, even poached 2 of her core team members. One of her angel investors had quietly moved with him. He hadn't attacked her business, he'd mirrored it, and then slid into her place. This is how the Trojan advisor operates. Not through confrontation, but through comfort. They build trust fast. Too fast. They get personal. They volunteer vulnerability. They offer stories that disarm you. And without realizing it, you lower the drawbridge. You start sharing everything. But here's the Stoic truth. A friend is one who wishes well to another independently of fortune. Seneca. And yet, a Trojan advisor only appears when your fortune begins to rise. So how do you know the difference between genuine counsel and a parasite in disguise? Start by watching the pace of intimacy. Real alliances take time. Beware of the ones who seem to understand you too quickly, mirror your frustrations too perfectly, or become indispensable too soon. Second, monitor how much you're revealing. If you've shared more with them in 3 weeks than with your board in 3 years, that's not connection, that's infiltration. Third, observe what they do with access. Do they lift others? Or isolate influence? Do they widen your strategic reach? Or quietly centralize trust into themselves? And finally, check your gut. If there's ever a moment where you feel like they know too much, pause. Because instincts sharpened by pressure don't lie. Your discomfort isn't paranoia, it's signal. Again, the Stoics warned us not to mistake empathy for alignment, because a man can look into your eyes, echo your values, and still aim for your crown. Do not be deceived by seeming goodwill. The wolf lurks beneath the fleece. Epictetus, paraphrased. If someone is suddenly everywhere, managing your stress, handling your people, editing your future, Ask yourself one thing: are they helping you lead or positioning themselves to lead without you? Because the Trojan advisor doesn't just hate your authority, they want to wear it. They want to walk into rooms you built without needing your name on the door. So the next time someone offers comfort too quickly, access too freely, and counsel too eagerly, slow down. Trust is earned, not gifted. And when trust is weaponized, the cost isn't just betrayal, it's replacement. Sign number 4, the boundary tester. If this sounds like you, constantly brushing off the small disrespect, laughing off the subtle digs, then someone's already testing how far they can push you before they strike. It never starts with a full frontal attack. No one storms your office, demands your title, or openly mocks your leadership. No, they begin with jokes, with tone, with harmless moments. They cut you off in meetings but didn't mean to. They make a comment about your age, your decisions, your tone, then follow it with a laugh. They poke at your authority publicly, but always just beneath the level of offense. And you don't want to seem insecure. You're the calm one, the composed one, the stoic one, so you let it go. Once, then again, and again. But here's what no one tells you. Those small boundary tests aren't random. They're calibrated. They're watching how much space they can take, how far they can lean, how loud they can speak over you without consequence. You think they're just edgy, that maybe they're just pushing limits because they admire you, but they're not looking for guidance. They're looking for weakness. And every time you don't respond, every time you give them the benefit of the doubt, you teach them something dangerous, that your silence is not strength, it's permission. I once worked with an executive coach who consulted for a Fortune 500 CEO, someone admired for his ability to stay level-headed under pressure. His leadership team respected him. His board trusted him. But one new hire, a director with an aggressive edge, began making little moves. Sarcastic jokes in front of clients, dismissive eye rolls in strategy sessions, private Slack messages questioning the CEO's relevance. No formal insubordination, just friction. But it built. And when the CEO didn't address it, the team took notice. The culture began to shift, the boundaries blurred. Eventually, that director made a bold move, bypassing the CEO on a critical investor call and subtly presenting himself as the future of the company. It didn't start there. It started with one laugh, one passive comment, one boundary unguarded. The Stoics taught us to discipline the mind, yes, but also to defend the standard. You become what you tolerate. A modern truth with ancient roots, because a Stoic leader doesn't ignore disrespect. He processes it without ego and addresses it without emotion. Not to dominate, but to define the terms of engagement. So ask yourself, who in your environment tests the line, not once, but habitually? Who gets a little too close in tone, in presence, in challenge, but always wraps it in charm or humor? And most importantly, who do you make excuses for just because confronting them would make things awkward? Here's what to do. Stop trying to appear unfazed. You don't have to react loudly, but you must respond clearly. The next time they interrupt you, pause. Let the room feel the weight. Then continue, without apology, but with intention. When they joke at your expense, don't laugh. Meet their eyes. Let silence answer for you. If they dismiss your input subtly, reaffirm your direction publicly and calmly. Let everyone hear where the command truly sits. Because if you don't, they won't just test again, they'll escalate. And before you know it, you're defending territory you never intended to surrender. Boundary testing is not immaturity. It's the first draft of mutiny. And the longer you stay silent, the more others begin to doubt not them, but you. The Stoic leader doesn't chase approval. He commands respect by protecting what he has built. Not through control, but through clarity. Fire tests gold, Adversity tests character, and disrespect tests your standards. Adapted from Seneca. So if someone's testing your line, it's because they believe it can be moved. Prove them wrong, not by attacking, but by anchoring. By making the line immovable, not with force, but with presence. Because the person who keeps pushing the edge isn't just being difficult, they're checking if you're asleep, and if you are, they won't just cross the line, they'll take the ground beneath your feet. Sign number 5, the long game challenger. Most people think betrayal comes fast, but the most devastating kind doesn't attack, it waits. There's a certain type of person who doesn't compete with you head-on. They don't challenge your decisions. They don't push back in meetings. They don't make moves, not yet. Because they know something most people don't. Time is the ultimate weapon. And the longer they wait, the more trust they gather. The more defenses you lower. The more you forget that even silence can be strategic. The long game challenger doesn't hate you openly. In fact, they praise you. They support you. They ask how they can help. They position themselves just close enough to look loyal, and just far enough to stay clean when things go sideways. They observe your leadership style, your emotional triggers, your blind spots, your burnout patterns, not to help you manage them, but to schedule their rise around them. Their game isn't about force, it's about precision. It's about watching you slip, not pushing you off the edge. You won't see them coming. Because they don't want your job today. They want your legacy tomorrow. I once worked with a founder whose COO had been with him since the beginning. Dependable, quiet, efficient. The kind of man you never suspect, because he never asks for more. For years, the founder led aggressively, built culture, raised capital, made bold calls. But eventually, as with most visionaries, he hit burnout. He began to delegate. And the COO stepped in, calmly, naturally, seamlessly. Meetings were taken. Investor calls were handled. Team morale stayed steady. And somewhere along the way, people started going to the COO first, just for clarity, then for approvals, then for direction. It didn't feel like a coup, because it wasn't one. It was a transfer of gravity. And by the time the founder realized what had shifted, he was already irrelevant. The board didn't push him out, they just stopped calling him back. This is how the long game challenger wins, not by dismantling your empire, but by absorbing it. Slowly, silently, strategically. And the most dangerous part, they don't even need to make you look bad, they just need to be there when you fall, ready, rehearsed, and easy to choose. The Stoics warned us long ago, don't be overheard complaining. Not even to yourself. Marcus Aurelius. Because weakness whispers long before it shouts. And someone, somewhere, is always listening. So how do you detect a threat that hides in loyalty? Start here. Observe ambition that disguises itself as humility. Pay attention to those who never challenge your authority, but always position themselves adjacent to it. They don't want control today. They want readiness. Listen closely to how they ask about your personal life. Are you taking time off? Are you thinking about succession? Have you thought about selling? They frame these as concern, but they're probing your timeline, they're measuring distance. And more importantly, they're plotting entry. Here's what to do. Never hand over entire domains without building oversight. Keep ownership of key relationships, especially external ones. And when you delegate power, also delegate accountability, visibly, publicly. Stoic leaders don't fear trust, but they never forget that trust can be weaponized through patience. Power, unguarded, does not erode. It migrates. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Epictetus. That means protecting what you've built before you're too exhausted to fight for it. Because if someone has made themselves indispensable, irreplaceable, unshakable, without ever asking for it, you're not being respected. You're being replaced in advance. The long game challenger is not a saboteur. They don't destroy, they inherit. They don't just hate your authority. They want to make sure that when you leave, no one remembers how much of it was ever yours. So if you feel it, that quiet shift, that subtle bypass, that invisible reassignment of power, don't wait. Reclaim your presence, reinforce your standard, reassert your voice. Because this isn't just betrayal, this is erasure, engineered gently, quietly, over years. And if you let it, it won't just steal your position, it will bury your legacy. No one tells you this, but some enemies don't come to destroy you directly. They come to wait, to smile, to mirror, to replace. You thought you were building a company, but you were also building a throne, and thrones invite challengers. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The ones who study your schedule, who echo your words, who test your tolerance, who earn your trust not to protect your crown, but to measure its weight in their own hands. These 5 signs weren't about drama, they were about survival. Because the truth is, when someone truly wants you gone, they don't attack your body. They unravel your command. They study how you lead, so they can lead after you. They don't need to beat you. They just need to wait until you fade. The Stoics warned us, be not deceived by false friends. Guard your soul as you would your sword. And in modern leadership, your soul is your standard. So here's the wake-up call. If someone keeps showing up, but never offers original thought, if someone praises you endlessly, but always asks about your future plans, if someone makes harmless digs that chip at your authority, if someone always seems helpful, but always centralizes power, you're not paranoid. You're being studied. You can't afford to lead on autopilot anymore. You can't afford to give everyone access just because they haven't yet shown disloyalty. And you can't afford to ignore discomfort, because in this game, instinct is intel. So what do? You tighten the circle. You audit the energy. You watch the watchers. And most of all, you lead like someone who knows the throne is always being circled. Because in this world, no one takes your place overnight. They build toward it in silence. And if you're not defending your standard, you're already under siege. If this video shook something in you, don't scroll past it. Drop a comment. I've seen the signs. Let others know they're not alone. Let the silent leaders find their voice. Then, send this to someone who's rising in leadership, someone who might be too trusting, too tired, too surrounded, because one conversation can save a legacy. And if this hit too close to home, good. That means you're finally awake. Now lead like it.